open yet.
Okay. Yay.
Recording in progress. Hold on, I'm muting myself.
Good afternoon. We're going to call the Los Osos Groundwater Basin Management Committee meeting for November 12th, 2025 to order. Start with the roll call.
Director Sosena?
Here.
Director Gibson?
Here.
Chair Zimmer?
Here.
And then do you want to address, so Director Reinecke is dealing with the family care issue and wasn't able to be present in person. And so it's my understanding that with approval of the board, she can participate remotely in the meeting.
Okay.
So moved. Yes, fine with that.
All right. Approved.
Okay. Jamie, can you promote Beth if you haven't already? Director Reinecke?
I'm here, present online. Thank you.
Great. Thank
Okay.
you.
Welcome. All right. We'll go to item 3, Pledge Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Item 4, board member comments. Beth, do you have any comments online?
No, I have no comments.
Okay, we have no comments. Go to item 5, special presentation. We have no special presentations today. Moving right along to item 6, the consent agenda. We have 3 things on the agenda: 2025 financial report, approval of proposed reserve fund use, and approval of minutes from the October 15th, 2025 BMC meeting.
Yeah, so the primary item of note in the consent agenda is the request for use of the reserve funds. As discussed at our previous board meeting, this has been a high level of effort year for the BMC, tackling a new groundwater model, some new land use items, and a number of other additional groundwater monitoring improvement and other initiatives. And so the level of effort associated with all that, both on the administrative and the technical support side, has exceeded, the budgeted line items for this calendar year. And so we're requesting authorization of use of reserve funding to cover those additional costs, which are shown on the slide and are described in the agenda packet. Specifically on the technical side, there were several different iterations of sustainable yield calculations based on input from the board. And then we've had a number of additional BMC meetings and as well as BMC party staff meetings as we've worked through these substantive issues this year.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Okay, we have a motion?
Well, I'd like to ask a question first. In terms of reserves, do we have a target that we try and enter each year with? And then a plan to get to that point? I assume we're spending that down.
Yes, I believe we have a 10% reserve target that we had approved and thankfully achieved last year, which is what has generated the reserves that we have been able to utilize this year. We likely won't be able to reserve 10% for next year, unfortunately. But that was the intent of the sort of the accounting switch we did a couple of years ago, was at least to be able to carry money over year to accommodate higher level of effort initiatives.
Well, and I mean, reserve balance at the end of the year, 23,600, our overall budget's around 3, right? So we're not doing too bad. I would think that the budget, and we will talk about it when we get there, will replenish that to a point where we have at least that. And we also rolled over. I think the other thing is that a lot of things from last year got rolled over into this year, both expense and revenue, or hold a carryover cash. So
Yeah, that's a great point. We do have a budget item later on the agenda. There's a contingency both for technical services and general contingency included in that, as well as it refreshes the budgets for all of the BMC tasks. And yeah, it's not like we've utilized all the funding. It's just in certain tasks we've exceeded the budget, but we actually have a number of tasks that we are rolling over the funding. So we will be able to continue the progress on the Sweet Springs monitoring well, the geophysics initiative, and there likely will be some savings in some of the other tasks that will roll over as well. So yeah.
Thank you.
And isn't that where the 70,000 came from? It's from leftover?
That was left over from the previous year. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, we'll go ahead and open this to public comment.
If you're in the boardroom and you would like to make a public comment, please come to the podium. And if you're online, please raise your hand. We will take any public comments in the boardroom first. There is no public comment online or in person.
I'll move approval of consent.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes.
All right, moving on to item 7, public comments for items not appearing on the agenda.
If you would like to make a public comment and you're in the boardroom, please come up to the podium. And if you're online, please raise your hand. We will take public comments in the boardroom first.
Deborah Howe. I am a proponent of the initiative to acquire Sunnyside School for the community of Los Osos. And while this may have been under item 6, I wanted to put forward the concept that recycled water for Sunnyside School would reclaim 5 acre-feet. And there may be some way to fund that. Currently, there's no funding for that. But if we had some sort of supplemental water fee, something like the Title 19 fees that could be collected so that the money for that could be acquired. My understanding it's about $300,000 to do that retrofit. So I just want to put that out there for the BMC for their consideration.
Thank you.
There are no further public comments in the boardroom, so we will move to online. Jeff Edwards, all you have to do is unmute yourself.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Jeff Edwards, and I wanted to caution the committee about Los Osos and its financial bandwidth. Specifically looking at the existing tax bill for Los Osos. And a typical single-family residence has about 10 line items, and the list is growing. There's the regular Prop 13 tax, which varies depending on what folks have paid for their property. Then we have state water project. There's a charge. It's fairly nominal, but we know that's going to go up, and rightfully so. We need to pay for the pipeline and also pay for the water to put in the pipeline. there are two school board, San Luis Coastal Unified School Board bonds. There's a Quest to College bond. Then we've got the $200 million capital expense for the Los Osos water recycling facility. And then the accompanying, which are actually greater than the capital costs on an annual basis, are the rates and charges, which we're closing out a 5-year rate increase real soon. And my belief is there's going to be another rate increase on the heels of that. Then ironically, we have the $20 million bond floated by the CSD back when Broderson was purchased. And again, ironically, that's now with the county's wastewater project. There's a drainage charge. There's a special fire tax that's going up. There may be a Parks and Rec tax on the June ballot in 26. SLOCOG is proposing an increased sales tax. San Luis County is talking about an increased sales tax and or an increase in the TOT. You've got miscellaneous utilities. The overall point is there is very little bandwidth for additional water resource projects. We need to be very careful about what we choose in terms of projects and what their cost benefit ratio is. And then I'll just close in saying these remarks will segue into remarks I'll be making under agenda item 9A, which includes projects that have no relevance or feasibility for Los Osos, being in the tens of millions of dollars. How they ever came up for even consideration is beyond me, but thank you very much.
All right, there's no further public comment in the boardroom or online.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I might, to Ms. Howe's suggestion, it's something that I am interested in. I think it makes a lot of sense. I think we've mentioned, at least in passing here, the Title 19 retrofit to build ordinance. We've always known that it would reach the end of its useful life eventually as targets for retrofit became fewer and further between. And so I think looking ahead, that the idea of finding a way to take in lieu fees that are connected to housing and use it for basin improvements makes a lot of sense. So it's certainly something that I'll be talking to our planning staff about, expanding the opportunities to get real water savings out of the retrofit to build process with a few more options than simply changing out fixtures. So stay tuned.
Yeah. And that would apply to more than just Sunnyside School, though, right?
Right,
That's
exactly.
across the
I mean,
board.
I think we can really generalize it and look at anything that cuts demand or increases supply as having the proper nexus to whatever continued growth the community sees. We got to figure out what is the situation now for existing users and what should any new users pay, the proportionality basically. So nexus and proportionality, though, I think are pretty easily established, and we'll get the experts on that at a point, but you might expect that sometime in the new year, some different options for the boards. Obviously something that the county in its land use planning and permitting authority would want to and need to coordinate very closely with the purveyors. So we want to, certainly entertain your ideas as to what kinds of projects you might find useful to fund.
Okay, sounds good. Look forward to it. Okay, that ends public comment. We'll move on to item 8, Los Osos Basin Update Report.
Thank you, Chair Zimmer. Happy to provide the Los Osos Basin Update Report. Just give you a brief update on some key initiatives. Some are later on the agenda, some are not. First one, with respect to the water recycling funding study. that is on the agenda, and we are closing in on wrapping up that study, and which will provide a lot of good information for the BMC and the community's consideration. Then the Sweet Springs monitoring well, we've been coordinating closely with several county departments on the permitting and other requirements for moving that project forward. Unfortunately, though, due to some delays in the ability to acquire HCP credits, that project's likely going to push out until 2026. We've got the funding secured, and so I think that, as described earlier, that is just something that we'll work on next year as one of our key initiatives. And then we did, a while ago, we completed the modifications to wells LA 14 and 16, and then more recently, with the board's approval of the contract, we completed the wellhead surveys at LA 16, and then 3 other wells that we needed more accurate elevation data for. So just continuing to improve our groundwater monitoring network. And then at our last meeting, obviously, we had several substantive items, including the sustainable yield, which the board adopted of 2,000 acre feet per year for calendar year 2026. And then the other one was the Los Osos Basin Management Committee 2026 growth rate recommendation letter, which was submitted to the county's groundwater sustainability department as specified under the growth management ordinance. And then the county planning has provided some updates on the HCP, and then the Title 19 retrofit to build programs, which are in your packet. Again, the delay into 2026, and no new Title 19 certificates were issued in August and September. And the county had, I don't know if we mentioned this, but a couple of months back, the county had updated their website. County planning had updated their website for the Los Osos URL or basin, or however you want to characterize it. So just to make it hopefully a little more accessible and user-friendly for people that have questions about Los Osos. And then moving on to the public works section, we've got the updated recycled water and wastewater flows tracking spreadsheet or table. And I think what is kind of exciting to note here is now we're able to track recycled water flows for urban irrigation, which as of July now includes Los Osos Middle School, Monarch Grove, and the community park, which were recently connected to the system. And so we should see higher recycled water usage for urban irrigation associated with those facilities as we move forward. And then finally, on the basin plan infrastructure updates, the CSD has continued to make progress towards its second program C well, or the Bay Oaks well, and is, I think, hoping to come online in late November or December. That concludes the Los Osos Basin update report.
Okay, thanks, Dan. Any comments? I have a comment on the Sweet Springs. The HCP credits, it's the Manzanita that's causing this delay, is that right? So, is there a way to go around without doing HCP credits? Is this like in the road right away, or is there anything any way we can get exceptions or discretion on this, or take another path of maybe it's the monitoring or coming into the wet season for the sale, things like that?
Yeah, we've been working closely with county planning on this. I think it gets complicated, and so I'll try to characterize it as best I can. I think that the Morro Manzanita has coverage under the HCP for the federal resource agencies, but the county program hasn't been able to be initiated because they need to mitigate some property to generate the credits. And because the state is considering or listed Moro Manzanita, that's actually preventing those mitigation projects from moving forward, which is preventing the credits from being able to be generated. So the Sweet Springs well site itself doesn't have any Moro Manzanita, but the state's listing and the slowing down of the HCP mitigation projects is what's creating the challenge, unfortunately.
So do we have to go with the HCP path, I guess, can we go the old
That's
way?
what
Hire
we're
a
told.
consultant, and
Mhm.
if there is,
See, I mean, that's a good question. I will take it on Mr. Heim will say so that once the HCP is in place, that may be the path that has to go. But, you know, the other path is going to be way more time consuming and way, you know, doing your own habitat concert. I forget, there's a section 10 and a section 7 consultation. And if you know, we've done it for years on these individual piece by piece, and they're just really frustrating. So yeah, it was a late hit by the state on a petition by 2 individuals to put Moro Manzanita on the state's endangered species list. We made 2 trips to Sacramento to try to dissuade the Fish and Game Commission to not do that. Unfortunately, the bar is low, and what it isn't that they have even designated them. It is that they have accepted them for study to be designated, and that brings in a world of bureaucracy that we are trying to navigate with some specific exemptions. Basically, the fact that we've done all this work for the federal listing puts us in a good place to get a fairly quick way of exempting or, you know, paralleling the state and the feds, but fairly quick does not mean quick in any absolute kind of sense. So we're hoping by the end of the year, we've got that clear.
okay, let's go ahead and go to public comment.
If you have a public comment here in the boardroom, please come to the podium. And if you're online, please raise your hand and we will take any public comments in the boardroom first. It looks like there's some public comment online or in the boardroom, so we'll bring it back to the board.
Okay. All right, moving on to item 9, action items. We have 2 items. The first one is 9A, final draft Los Osos water recycling funding program study supply alternative analysis.
Yeah, and so thank you, Chair Zimmer. This is an initiative that we've talked about relatively extensively, as it also includes the transient model. You know, there's really kind of 2 primary components to the study. One was the development of the transient model as a tool that we could then utilize to evaluate different supplemental water supply and recycled water opportunities for the Los Osos Basin. And so we're excited to have members of both teams, WC and Cleith Harris Geologists, here to present what we'd call the final draft of the water recycling funding study that has, and you've received a presentation on this, an earlier iteration of this, and this is a version that's been updated to incorporate the modeling from the transient model. So we're leveraging the latest available tool set. It's also, we got input from the BMC party staff representatives. So they've had a chance to review an admin draft and comment on that. And then we're still working on incorporating comments from the State Water Board, which we'll talk about in our presentation. But again, this is an initiative that we embarked on really over 2 years ago to help fund a transient model and better inform the BMC and the community about what are the different water supply options that could be available for Los Osos to improve its water supply sustainability. And so I think with that, I'll turn it over to Rob to present unless there's any questions from the board.
Okay, do I need to press something to get this? Okay,
Yeah, we'll have to run the slides for you.
okay.
but-
Is the microphone working? Okay, great. So as Dan said, I presented over the web a few months ago, and the main update since then has been the updated groundwater model results, which you guys have been talking about since then. I've repeated some slides from last time because it's been a little bit, and then just for the audience, but I'll go through the repeated slides relatively quickly, and of course, ask questions as needed. But we are here to at the end of this study process, and so we're looking for your comments today. I will touch on the comments we got from the state. For the state comments, really are just checking the box of all the requirements, and we're mainly going to be pointing them to content that's already in the report. So their comments are not going to change any of the analysis or conclusions that we conducted. But we are planning to finalize everything next week. And again, incorporate your comments from today.
Rob, if I could
yeah.
just, so on the comments, are you just accepting comments from this board and the state right now, or is the public still able to make comments on it?
I mean, we can try to incorporate comments from the public where relevant. We're on a tight timeline. I should have mentioned this is due November 30th. So there's only so much that we could consider inclusion. And then also, there's certain requirements of this report that the grant outlines. So yeah, but I mean, I think if there's anything relevant that we would need to address, we would try to
Okay.
incorporate that.
Yeah. I just wanted to clarify that. I just didn't see it in here. So thank you. And that's fine, however we do it.
Well, let me just confirm. It would seem to me that it is this committee's responsibility to take ownership of the report.
Mhm.
So we're being asked here to approve this report. If we get comments, we can choose to incorporate them or not. We certainly would want to make sure we respond to the state's comments. Whether there are other comments, that's up to us.
Yeah, I would agree with, I mean, you give us direction for how you want us to proceed. We've provided a draft. We're going to get an opportunity for public comment here. We are going to be working, just to be clear, there will be some changes, maybe less, more so just pointing the state towards where the information that they were asking about is, but there will be some changes from the report, probably regardless of what input we get, before it goes to the final. And, we can run through staff, just given the time constraints, just to make sure that all the parties are satisfied with
upon the delegation of that function from this committee.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. And I'll just clarify that the state is weighing in because they provided grant funding for this
Right.
project, but ultimately this is for the BMC to run with going
Yeah.
forward.
And typically we take comment from the public on our reports and stuff. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so we just have a few slides on some background, again, just to get some numbers together, and then I'll go through the alternatives. So Dan just touched on this. The grant funding from the state really focused first on developing and refining the transient groundwater model, which you guys have been talking about. And then the second component of the funding was to prepare the study, which has some specific requirements to comply with the grant. And I should also note those requirements set projects in this report up for subsequent funding from the state, subsequent water recycling funding from the state. Next slide, please. So these are just some numbers just to give some perspective on where we're at. So the middle columns are what the projections were from 2015 in the Los Osos Basin Plan, and looking at projecting to having to manage 780 acre feet per year, growing out to 1,120 acre feet per year, and mainly just highlighting the fact that we're way below that right now, and the build out flows for the wastewater plant are substantially lower than what was projected just 10 years ago, and that's consistent with what we're seeing across the state. But it does impact some of the wastewater management and recycled water use opportunities, because if you go to on the right side, looking at what's the management to date. And for the most part, it's going to the leach fields at Broderson and Bay Ridge. But with everyone's efforts, we've been increasing reuse in the community over the years, and we're ending up with the baseline projection of 105 acre feet per year, which is basically what we're assuming is going to happen year in and year out going forward, primarily from sea pines, but also the connections that have been made over the last few years, and a little bit of agricultural reuse thrown in. And so our study is looking at going beyond this, that 437 acre feet per year that's assumed to go to leach fields going forward, as well as the growth, the limited growth that's projected to happen. Next slide, please. And then from the demand side, looking at the purveyor demands and projected demands. So existing demands, about 1,000 acre feet of groundwater pumping happening right now, around 540 acre feet of wastewater being generated. When you take out the planned reuse and the minimum leach field deliveries, it leaves around 420 acre feet of wastewater that could potentially be reused. Now, with the projected growth, at a build-out condition, it's projected to add another 150, give or take, acre feet per year of wastewater. And so that's an additional amount of wastewater that potentially could be a recycled water supply as well. Next slide. So we take those numbers and we're looking at, well, what can we do with that wastewater? So this is a summary slide, and I'm gonna fairly briefly walk through the alternatives that we looked at, and then get into the alternatives analysis. But starting at the top, looking at urban reuse, which is basically what's being used right now, bringing recycled water for irrigation of grass and such. So we've got 2 schools that are planned for connection that have not been connected. So that's the first A1. A2 is looking at Memorial Park, which is adjacent to the water reclamation facility. And then the third one, agricultural reuse, is looking at taking the recycled water and delivering to agriculture. I'll talk about that a little more as we go through those slides. Then the C1, 2, 3, 4 is taking the wastewater, and instead of going to Broderson, discharging it near the creek and letting that percolate into the ground and become part of the supply that can eventually be recovered and pumped into town for use. Then we've got potable reuse alternatives. D is indirect potable reuse, that's injecting water into the groundwater basin to create a seawater intrusion barrier, which is, the main metric that's being looked at from a groundwater sustainable yield perspective is preventing seawater intrusion. And E is direct potable reuse. This was just passed by the state rules wise, and is we're basically required to look at it. It's very expensive, and it would not be happening here for a long time, if ever. And then the last 2 are looking at non-recycled water alternatives to compare against. So one is expanding the existing existing Golden State's upper aquifer nitrate treatment system. And the last is the intertie pipeline that Los Osos has been developing, Los Osos CSD, for bringing in imported water. And so in both of those scenarios, we wouldn't be changing recycled water use. So the next couple of slides, I'm just going to walk through those alternatives just for some background. So the urban reuse is looking at connecting Baywood Elementary and Sunnyside Elementary. I think Sunnyside was mentioned earlier. The main constraint to these is the conversion cost to bring recycled water to the site. The pipelines are already near the sites, but I think from the county's experience and from experiences elsewhere, it can be very expensive. And so it's also requires a site-specific evaluation that we did not do as part of this study. So we used placeholder values based on other sites, but I'll just flag that that's
to be able to move forward with those and make a real decision on whether to move forward with them, site-specific conversion evaluations are going to be needed. And then Sunnyside, if a purchase happens and a conversion happens, there's a whole other amount of development that's going to be happening there as well. Next slide. So on the ag reuse and the thing that we clarified as we went through this process is there originally was a lot larger demand for ag recycled water use, but for the properties that have been approved for use, for the most part, they're being dry farmed, and so delivering recycled water to them doesn't offset groundwater pumping. And so the amount that we're focused on is offsetting groundwater pumping. And so that's where we get to 12 acre foot per year offset for the May and Goodwin properties. And so also for all the alternatives that are occurring in the Creek Valley, to get a water supply benefit for the community, we need to pump that water and bring it over to the community. So it adds additional infrastructure costs where this should be relatively, well, it would be relatively inexpensive to increase deliveries to these existing properties that use recycled water. Getting the full benefit, water supply benefit of that versus a disposal, you need to add that infrastructure. So that's why this alternative ends up adding costs. Next slide, please. So for creek discharge, we looked at a couple different alternatives, and just for the interest of time, I won't walk through the details of all of them, but there's two main variables for each of them. One is how it's permitted. So a discharge adjacent to a creek is done throughout the county, throughout the state, and can be done under a normal discharge permit. But it is up to the regional board to decide whether that is a discharge or it's a GRIP, a groundwater reuse replenishment project, which the GRRP then puts it into a whole nother regulatory category, which would add a lot of costs and limit the amount of water that could actually be discharged. And so previous efforts by the BMC and CSD looked at this. And so we built on that work, and we didn't engage the regional board in this process because once we got into this, the costs were relatively high, so we didn't think it was a good use of everyone's time. But the way the GRIPs work is the more treatment you add, generally the more water you're able to discharge. And for these alternatives, the more treatment we added, the more costs we added, the amount of water that could be added didn't end up having it be worth it. So those are the creek discharge alternatives. Next slide, please. Then for indirect potable reuse, a seawater barrier, so this requires advanced treatment of recycled water, so water purification like they are currently doing in Monterey, like they're building in Soquel and Ventura right now, and have been doing in Orange County and LA and San Diego. So that's reverse osmosis and ultraviolet light and advanced oxidation, all expensive treatment steps, and from a capital and operating perspective, and you're generating brine or RO concentrate that needs to be discharged. And so the discharge, again, there's a couple options. You can haul it or you can get it to the ocean. To simplify the evaluation, we assume we'd tie in with the city of Morro Bay's outfall, but that's something we highlight in the report. Is something like this is ultimately pursued, that alternative will actually need to be run down more. So again, because of the expense of the alternatives that included RO, we did not fully engage with the city of Morro Bay about how that would logistically work. We kind of just did some basic cost estimating for these alternatives. And so this one has 2 injection wells and would be using the existing production wells to capture that water. Well, I'll talk about the modeling in a couple slides. Next slide, please. So direct potable is like indirect potable from a treatment perspective, but additional treatment steps are added. So adding capital and O&M costs, and there's additional monitoring and reporting that makes these very expensive. So you avoid some of the facilities like an injection well, but it becomes more expensive because of all the additional treatment and operating and monitoring that has to happen. Next slide, please. So non-recycled water alternatives, the upper aquifer nitrate treatment is looking at expanding Golden State's plant. We assume 2 new wells and to provide that water, and it would be pumping from the upper aquifer, treated for high nitrate, and then distributed to part of the cost assumes some distribution upgrades so that the water can go beyond Golden State's system and benefit the entire community. The caveats we had for this alternative are that, number one, it would be leveraging existing facilities that Golden State ratepayers funded. And so there would need to be a process to figure out what the proper compensation would be to make something like that work. And then it gets a little more complicated too when you're involving investor-owned utilities and the rate-making process for them and the different partnerships there. So just that's a process to work through. The other thing is there has been detection of other water quality constituents potentially of concern beyond nitrate that may require additional treatment. And so before this alternative goes much farther, further investigation into the water quality potential concerns would be needed, because if you have to add additional treatment, then you're now adding costs, and that makes this much more expensive. So I think that's the main caveats for the upper aquifer nitrate treatment. And then the last one we looked at is the water resiliency intertie pipeline. This is the image that Los Osos CSD has generated. So I apologize, the text is super small on that, but the gist is bringing the pipeline over, tying into the imported water pipeline coming through Chorro Valley, and conveying it over to Los Osos. And from an infrastructure perspective, it's fairly straightforward as far as the pipeline goes and costing that out. The biggest uncertainty for this project is the actual cost of the water. And there's different ways that it can be approached. The permanent purchase of rights and capacity is the most certain approach, but it's also the most expensive approach. And the lower cost approach is buying water when it's available in wet years, and then you're paying for O&M within the system. And then there's still unresolved. The process for acquiring that water and the cost for acquiring that water has not been resolved. And so I think that is something the county has been working on the past couple years. They've made some progress in actual sales of imported water. But for Los Osos to acquire that water and have some certainty with the cost, that's one of the things that needs to be worked through. So we included a range of costs for this alternative, and the range is due to the range of potential costs to acquire the water. And I guess I should say all the other ones are assumed to operate year in and year out. This project is assumed to operate it would be bringing water in wet years when the imported water is relatively cheap, and then not pumping as much during that time. And then during drier years, you pump more. And so in the long term, it's a similar. You're still pumping at the sustainable yield, but that additional water you bring in allows you to ramp up and down and increase your ultimate supply. Okay, so that was a quick run through the alternatives. I just have a couple of slides on the evaluation right now. So I'll go back to that table that I presented before, and what we added in these last two columns is Director Gibson actually brought this up and we presented last time, is the project yield. The yield of the project that the project provides isn't necessarily the benefit, the new supply from the basin that you get from it. And so we did some modeling. We did modeling of 5 scenarios, and then we inferred results from some of those model runs to estimate the basin benefit for these projects. And so what the first set of projects is, this came up last time of what's the benefit of Broderson for the basin. And so one of the model runs that was looked at was shifting a certain amount of water from Broderson. How much does the sustainable yield change? And the rough result was, if you shift 100 acre feet, the sustainable yield went down by about 25 acre feet. So there's about a 25% benefit to Broderson.
Sustainable yield.
That amount went up. Or if you took 100 acre feet out of the basin and just put it to just moved it out of the basin, didn't offset pumping, the sustainable 100 acre feet out, the yield went down by 25. So the 100 acre feet that would have been going into Broderson was providing 25 acre feet of sustainable yield. So for the recycle water projects, we're basically looking at shifting water from that would go to Broderson and doing something else with it. So we are losing the benefit of that water that would have gone to Broderson and having a direct use. So in the example of sending water to the schools, if we send 12 acre feet to the schools, you lose some of that Broderson benefit, but you get 100% benefit from sending it to the school. So that's where you go from delivering 12 acre feet, but a net benefit to the basin of 9. And so that is the factor that applied for all those options that are shifting water from Broderson to a direct use. So the urban reuse and the ag reuse are in that category. And then the second category of modeling was looking at the creek discharge. And because the creek, because it's a limited volume and there's wet years and dry years, discharging there every year in and year out, you don't necessarily get every drop that you put in. And so what the modeling found was, again, you put in 100 acre feet, you can pump out 75 acre feet reliably, and that's how much you can reliably get in and year out. And so that's where in this C1 scenario, this is what was modeled. We put in 160 acre feet, and on a long-term average, we were able to capture 120 acre feet of that. And so that's generally because in wet years, the basin gets full, it's running, and so that creek discharge doesn't provide as much benefit. And so working our way down, we did do modeling for the seawater intrusion barrier. And these results are similar to what we've seen in coastal basins up and down California, where you create an actual barrier. And so you're actually capturing water that had been going out to the ocean. And so the benefit is slightly higher than 1-to-1. The upper aquifer nitrate was modeled. And again, because the complication here is we're pumping from the upper aquifer and reducing pumping on the lower aquifer, and there is some interconnection, and so that's why we don't get 100% benefit there. But what we modeled here was basically the upper end of pumping from the upper aquifer without causing seawater intrusion, and then the additional basin benefit we get from that is an additional 400 acre feet. And I think that the last one, the intertie pipe got cut off there, but it's separate from everything. We'd be bringing in 300 acre feet on average, and that's just a new supply for the basin. So the increase in yield would be 300 acre feet. So the key is here, just keeping in mind that a project that has a certain yield that we're delivering a certain amount of water doesn't necessarily have a 1-to-1 benefit. And so we incorporate that into the unit cost when we look at the supplies. And so that's the next slide, is the unit cost. So what we looked at was we took the capital cost of the project, amortized it over 30 years, assuming an SRF loan, which long-term average is 2.1%, and then added O&M to that, annual O&M to that, and then divided by the basin benefit. And so what we get are some pretty high numbers. So, starting at the top, about $6,000 an acre foot. And I'll repeat the caveat I stated earlier about the very first one is that the capital costs there are fully based on the conversion costs of those sites. And we used costs that were that the county had from other sites in the area. There is a chance they could be lower, but it's going to take site specific evaluation. And if it is lower, then that unit cost would come down. Again, Memorial Park is expensive and the ag reuse, because we got to bring that water back into town beyond just the delivery to those customers. The creek discharge gets expensive because we have to bring the water back into town, and then also the additional treatment for the later ones. Seawater intrusion barrier, direct potable reuse are just expensive. They're highly capital, high operating costs. And then the upper aquifer nitrate and the intertie pipe were the lowest cost alternatives. And so the upper aquifer nitrate was around $2,000 an acre foot. Just repeat the caveats I noted earlier. We've got a placeholder cost for like a buy-in to the existing plant. That's just based on some very rough numbers of what it cost to originally buy it. And then the intertie pipe is actually about $2,500 to $3,000 an acre foot, with again the unit cost of purchasing imported water being the biggest uncertainty there. Just the infrastructure itself is a little bit under $2,000 an acre foot. Next slide, please. So I won't walk through each of these. I kind of the considerations I just mentioned are in that last column, but the takeaways are, from a cost perspective, the non-recycled water alternatives have the best unit costs, and that's, for the most part, that's really an economy of scale consideration, because pipes cost a lot, and whether you're moving 400 acre feet through it or 1,000 acre feet, the pipe costs don't change very much. And so I think that's what we're seeing with a lot of these infrastructure costs here. And then, so the last two, the non-recycled water ones have the best unit costs, with the caveat for the urban reuse at the schools being that could be lower if the conversion costs come in lower. So so moving to recommendations, the report lays out in the last chapter an implementation plan for each of these three projects, with the next steps addressing the uncertainties as the primary next recommendation. So on the intertie pipe, continuing to engage the county on resolving the costs of imported water. For the upper aquifer nitrate, working through the institutional feasibility, the buy-in costs, and then the emerging water quality concerns. And for the schools, defining the site conversion costs. And so the implementation plan goes into more detail on what would be required to implement all those projects. But that's really what the community, coming out of this study, those are the top alternatives for new supplies for the community. I just have one more slide and then the state comments, and I'll so for this, the study schedule is as Dan mentioned, we've got a due date at the end of the month to get the report for the state, and then the rest of the funding can be released for reimbursement. And so our plan is to address the state comments and anything we hear today next week and get that to the state for Thanksgiving. So that's what we have left, and then we'll talk about your comments here in a sec. The last thing is I'll cover those state board. I'll just go over the state board comments real quick.
Yeah, I think this is just kind of next steps.
Okay.
Yeah, what we've done and where we're at. So you received a presentation in July. Party staff reviewed an admin draft, and then we're incorporating state feedback. And then, yeah, we'll submit by November 30th and then state comments. Rob, if you just want to briefly run through them.
Yes. So this is just a standard. So again, I'll just step back. The state board is really, they're going through a checklist of stuff that is required to meet not just this grant, but also to get construction grants. And so going through this process actually sets you up to be able to get construction funding. And as an aside, there's the state just put 150 million from Prop 4 that went through last year is going to be added to this water recycling funding program next year. So there will be potentially some funding to pursue for water recycling projects, and there's going to be other groups of funding that'll be coming through next year as well, coming out of the Prop 4 funds from last year. So next comment. So stakeholder participation, we're just going to talk about the BMC meetings we had, and also touch on the previous outreach that we had, as well as the modeling presentations and such. This study built on a lot of previous work, and so we're going to make sure we mention all the work that went into that to acknowledge how we got here. Second comments on potential risk and delays. This is pretty straightforward for anyone's tried to build a project. You guys were talking about it earlier. Stuff that comes up while you try to build a project. So we do have a lot of this in there. We're going to point them to it. Water recycling market assessment. Again, point them to it. The Basin Management Plan has already done a good job of looking at this. The recycle storage analysis is a requirement. The storage at the water reclamation facility makes operating the recycled water system really nice. A lot of places would be super jealous of that storage because it's having to manage that in the system is not easy. So this is fairly straightforward for this project. The last one, the water balance and nitrogen loading. Again, the fact that you guys actually have a salt nutrient management plan, and the basin plan process has addressed all this, so we just need to point them to that. So typically this can be a big effort, but you guys have already gone through it, so this should be fairly easy. And then the last set of comments, regulatory coordination. So this is again specifying the conversations that we had. As I noted during my presentation, we did not do specific outreach during this study, but there was previous outreach, and we relied on public documents from each of these agencies. And the last one, expand the financial discussion, describe anticipated local and grant funding sources. They're actually looking for this to plan for their grant awards and their SRF loans and things like that. So this is where you start to say, hey, we might be asking for $1 million, whatever the number is, in a couple of years. And so I'll definitely follow up with the team on this to see what kind of information we want to put in there. It's not any kind of commitment, but they take this and add it to line items for future planning. So this is where the opportunity is. And I think that's it.
Yeah, and then we just had the recommendation for the BMC to review and comment on the final draft study, and then authorize submittal to the state board with any changes necessary to address comments from state board staff and then the BMC. And then I'd also like to thank Rob. Excellent job. Yeah, there was a little conversion issue with your presentation of this one, but you rolled with that very smoothly. So nice work.
All right, thank you. I'll bring it back to the board. Couple of comments, just clarifying. So Broderson, you mentioned 100 acre feet in, 25 acre feet benefit to the basin, 25% efficiency. Could we say that? Is that?
Yeah,
Okay.
the specific model scenario that was in Cleith Harris's memo looked at moving 400 acre feet out and saw 100 acre foot decrease in sustainable yield.
All right. Because I think overall the report's pretty good. I just, the reuse opportunities of this and finding projects that are more efficient I guess it's challenging. They're not there, you know, and they're really expensive. So we got the projects, it's the cost of them. I know we have some pipelines that go to different areas and hoping we could have utilized those a little better or something.
Question here.
Okay.
Well, just to clarify, so the scenario was to move half of the discharge to Broderson, which is 448, to, you know, quote unquote, spray fields, new agri use, but basically consumed and not a benefit. And so out of the 224 that was removed, 55 was, there was a decline in yield of 55. And that is relating the yield for this Broderson scenario to the sustainable yield scenario, which was the 2,000 acre foot per year scenario. So that's where all these scenarios have been compared to the sustainable yield scenario to develop that benefit. Now, the benefit of Broderson can be different for a different comparison. For example, the upper aquifer scenario where you're actually harvesting some of that water. Whereas before, you know, under comparison with sustainable yield scenario, the pumping is mainly lower aquifer on the west side. So it's kind of a rough, you know, efficiency, but certainly there's instances or scenarios where Broderson could be more efficient. And also, just to clarify that all the scenarios were compared to the sustainable yield scenario that did not include 5 years of current condition pumping. So technically you could compare it to 2020. So the decline would be 75. So there would be a 33% benefit far into the future after the 5-year period for adjustments to the sustainable yield scenario is happened. So there's some subtleties, but just want to clarify that.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I got Spencer there if I could. Mr. Chairman. So let me just, that's where I wanted to go, both on cost and on impact of the urban reuse alternatives. You know, I get these other ones obviously have huge infrastructure costs. But if we hook up the schools, let's say, trying to understand the net benefit to the basin, it's both a sustainable yield change and a production change, right? Because you look at, let's say we hook up 2 schools, Baywood and Sunnyside, we reduce pumping by 12 acre feet. But because we are using 12 acre feet of recycled water, that doesn't go to Broderson. And so we lose 3 acre feet of benefit on the sustainable yield side, right?
Right.
So we get a net of 9.
Right.
When you talk about the pumping reduction, are you taking it uniformly out of the entirety of your distribution, or are you removing it preferentially at a particular geographic? I mean, this is a way weeds detail, but it gets to the Memorial Park question.
Right. So in essence, the sustainable yield and the scenarios, the management scenarios, do not reduce pumping in that sense. So the only scenario where where discharges were reduced to Broderson and no change in pumping was the Broderson scenario.
Oh.
In the other scenarios, the pumping was optimized for the maximum under that particular scenario. So when you say, for example, in the schools, we reduce pumping by 12 acre feet, the pumping is available for other uses.
Right.
We didn't run a scenario where we reduced pumping by 12 acre feet.
Okay.
That was what, as Rob explained, that was inferred from the Broderson exercise where you just have less water go to Broderson and it goes to the schools. But we didn't have a scenario where we reduced pumping by 12 acre feet and had 12 acre feet less going to Broderson.
Okay. So what you're saying, what you're saying is the sustainable yield, if we connected the two stools, the sustainable yield could go up by 9 acre feet. And no matter what the change of the pumping is. I mean,
Yes,
because you got the
exactly.
production. side.
Yes, yes.
Okay, but so as we look at this, I mean, I'm glad that the connecting the schools made it, barely in as the third. Obviously, the intertie, the denitrification, those are the most cost effective. Makes sense. Let's go for it. Let's do it. Okay, but the urban reuse, it still hasn't been maxed out, and so in looking at whether we're going to pursue that, the question then becomes cost. And so as I look at the analysis of connecting Baywood and Sunnyside, the capital cost of $1 million seems on the high side, very, very conservative. We do have a couple of local recent examples of connecting Monarch and the middle school. So, and the pipe's right there. Ms. Howe referenced 300,000, whatever it is, just an observation that $1 million seems high, and also seems like great candidate for grant funding a capital request. So that's good. But more so on connecting the Memorial Park, and I realize there's cultural questions of whether we're going to put recycled, even Title 22 recycled water in the cemetery, but it's a 50 acre foot source there. But the net benefit listed at 38 acre feet assumes that you're putting in an expensive pipeline to take their water production and move it into the system. Why wouldn't we just up the pumping from existing wells instead of moving their water in? Why can we get rid of that? I mean, simply connecting them to the purple pipe and having them stop has some benefit to the basin, independent of then constructing a pipeline, right?
Right. So actually, so the Memorial Park it's under community, but it's not served by the purveyors.
Right.
So it's a completely different
Right.
situation from the schools.
Right.
So if you deliver water for the Memorial Park, there are wells in the Creek Valley. It's essentially the same as ag reuse, in lieu recharge. And we didn't do an in lieu recharge scenario for that. And that's what we would need to do to evaluate that. So I think it was treated as the community as 75% benefit, but I think we need to take another look at that because the 38 acre feet is high, seems high.
Yeah, if you don't pump the water back into town, it is, but there's some benefit.
Yeah, without pumping the water into, if you go to pump the water into town, then you got costs.
So I guess my observation is simply if we can get the ag interests to take recycled water and quit their groundwater pumping, we have some benefit to the basin.
Right.
That didn't seem to be explicitly studied here. Similarly,
Right.
Memorial Park, and those may calc out to back down in the 2,000 acre foot. I mean, let's finalize this report, get it in, but that seems like an obvious piece of study for soon.
Yes, and when we looked at it in the past, the benefit was about 20% or thereabouts.
Of what they stopped.
Yes, what they stopped.
But it might be at 10% of the cost of the project.
Sure.
Yeah. So, I mean, I just think that's something we need to follow up on. Cadillac is, put a pipe out to the east side and do true ag exchange.
Yeah, and maybe one final comment on the way the scenarios were run. As you pump more water in the model, you have more wastewater to dispose of, and so to compare apples to apples, once the disposal capacity of the current infrastructure, Broderson, Bayers Estates, and the 105 reuse options were exhausted, the remaining surplus or the remaining wastewater was sent to new ag reuse with no benefit. So And that came into play for these non-reuse options mainly, which were the upper aquifer and the intertie. So under those scenarios, while it's not reflected in the study, you're going to have more wastewater that you can actually do things with that haven't been credited for the benefit.
And we have the disposal at Broderson is actually a maximum of half the flow. We have a cap, not a floor. We have a cap.
Right.
And we're lucky in a way, we're operating at half capacity.
Mhm.
So we're not really pushing that cap.
Right.
Because we haven't until now gotten the full view of how we appreciate it.
So the only thing I'll add is just the concept of Creek Valley, only alternatives without the infrastructure. Using a 20% or 25% benefit, we could calculate that really quick. That's pretty simple. So
I mean, if that could be a line
Yeah,
in the
that's-
report,
yeah.
doesn't even need to be a table
Yeah.
or a formal memo, but that would be interesting to know.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, thank you. We'll go ahead and move to public comment. Thanks, Rob.
I'm sorry, Chair Zimmer, do you mind if I just ask a couple
Oh, sure.
questions before?
Sorry about that. Yes.
Yeah, no problem. This is Director Renicky. So I just have a couple questions. So I'm going to start with just a general comment. I think we talked about it the last time this came as a presentation. I feel like stormwater capture could really be an important part of the water portfolio for Los Osos. I feel like it's a missed opportunity, but in the future, I hope we do bring that in. So I don't know if there can be any comment on why it wasn't considered for this project or incorporated into the model at all. That's one. And then my last comment is just based on it's the cost, I think, of the brine disposal. So in the report, it does say it could be 1 to 2 days or a brine load every 1 to 2 days. And I think just the trucking is like $500, and they're going to raise the rates to 17 cents a gallon to dispose of it. I mean, I feel like the O&M cost just related to brine could be 1.5 million. And of course, all of that cost would be borne again by the purveyors. And so I just want to make sure that as we consider that solution, that we also recognize that this is once again going to be primarily a purveyor project where just the purveyor customers and Los Osos are going to have to cover that cost. So that was it for my comments.
And I'll just clarify, I think what you're talking about on the brine disposal with the trucking was mainly related to the nitrate treatment. And the costs we have included are similar to Golden State's existing disposal costs. And I didn't mention it, but I should have in the presentation. One of the things that we've noted to follow up on is the ability to increase production and then the ability to dispose of that increase in brine production from the nitrate treatment as something to follow up on as well.
Okay, great. Thank you for the response.
Okay, thank you. We'll go to public comment.
All right. If you have public comment and you're in the boardroom, please come up to the podium. And if you're online, please raise your hand. We will take any public comments in the boardroom first.
Deborah Howe again. Obviously, I think the schools is low-hanging fruit here on this urban use. Not as big of a reclamation as some of these other things, but it's would seem pretty cost effective. The other thing I want to mention, which is sort of tangential to this report is, and I've been here before talking about the sewer project for Cabrillo Estates. It's been designated a high nitrate loading area. The residents of Cabrillo Estates, the 250 homes there, want to connect to the sewer. And I'm wondering if that project would have any funding available through Prop 4. It would certainly add to the underused a wastewater treatment plant and provide additional discharge for recycled water.
Richard Margetson, just a quick question. The Memorial Park, could staff comment on the impact on seawater intrusion if they're receiving recycled water from the plant and not pumping from their wells? Because in past studies, anything as we go west, the reduction in pumping has less of an impact on seawater intrusion. If that could, they could elaborate on that. Sorry.
All right, there are no further public comments in the boardroom, so we will move to online. Jeff. Wait. Okay, yeah, Jeff Edwards, all you have to do is unmute yourself.
Thank you. Before you start my time, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to seek clarification on this whole idea of public comment, particularly written public comment. This report was just released, and I have a lot of comments, most of which I'd like to put in writing. I will convey some of them today. The idea that staff picks and chooses the comments that make it into this, I find that objectionable. So what is the situation there, again, before I start my comments?
Hey, Jeff, why don't you go ahead and make your comments, and then we'll bring that back to the board when we talk about it.
All right. I'm uncomfortable with that, but be that as it may, this report, it's a very good organization of existing information. And I understand that the purpose of the report is the state's looking for a copy. But I think it's important that it accurately convey the prospects for projects in particular. And I don't think it does that. Again, there's nothing new in this report. 90% of the ideas are simply not feasible, most of which due to the cost. So when there's discussion about projects or what maybe qualify for grant funding, nothing on this list does virtually. And the idea of further urban reuse at Baywood and Sunnyside, that's laughable. Is there any evidence the Memorial Park wants water now? I'm not aware of any. Likewise, the ag folks, does irrigated ag want any of the treated wastewater? I'm unaware of any new facts. The creek discharge items are completely not doable. We've got seawater barrier, that's kind of laughable. Direct potable reuse, also laughable. The upper aquifer, which we're pinning a lot of our hopes to, that's one of the three main suggestions here. That's, as you heard, it's limited both in quality and quantity. The idea of 475 acre feet being generated is ridiculous. 200 would probably be a maximum. And we also heard about qualitative issues. So that's not going to move the needle. And then there's the state water project. Now that has the capability of moving the needle, but we don't want temporary water. We want permanent table A water, and we probably want more than 300 acre feet. So in essence, G1 is really the only project that can move the needle. And I don't think any of the state funding that you're discussing is available for that. However, if I'm wrong, great. Let's have money for the water pipeline construction. That would be excellent. My suggestions are pursuing the state water project, put in the program C number 3 well. There's no discussion about that. Title 19 conservation needs to be strengthened, and the idea that the community is going to use 295 acre feet at build out is completely overstated, and it fully ignores the Title 19 savings, indoor savings that's projected by the Maddow study. So the numbers in this report are substantially misplaced and incorrect, which I think is a reason, again, to have written public comment that can be included in the draft that can clarify and likely enhance the effectiveness of the report. Otherwise, you might as well just put it on a shelf and forget about it, because that's what it's worth. I'd like to close with a little comment on Broderson. You know, the only thing
Hey,
this
Jeff.
study, and I'll conclude with this sentence, Mark. The only thing this study does about Broderson, it doesn't talk about how to make it better since it's working now. It diverts 50% of the flows to Broderson to ag and creek discharges, which are not feasible. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks, Jeff. Jeff, you mentioned you have these comments in writing, right?
No, I'd like to put them in writing. I just got the report.
Mr.
Just
Chair.
got it. And I'd like to usually there's a comment period, 3 weeks, a month. The idea that this is needed to submit now only to recoup some funds, delay it 30 days. There's no big deal. It'll just, you'll get the money in 30 days later. I don't see the problem. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jeff.
If I might, Mr. Chairman. The matter of meeting our obligations under the grant which funded this is important, and if we have a deadline coming up, we should do it. I would note that this item was properly noticed and agendized, full public notice that we were going to receive and comment this final draft report, and that we were going to submit it to the state. And the timeline was indicated there. So I would submit that any member of the public following our proceedings here had ample opportunity to provide us comments, or directly to either our staff or to us. This is not a draft environmental impact report where there is a specific requirement of this agency to receive public comment and have responses made. This is a wholly different beast. What I'd note in the public comment that we did receive, that it was, and let me also emphasize that this report is an analysis of options with estimates of cost going forward and benefit to the basin. It is not a feasibility study on any of the particular options, nor is it providing direction. It's showing us the most cost-effective of the options in front of us, but it is still up to this committee to decide, and the individual agencies that make up this committee to decide. So frankly, I in listening to comments made here, these were opinions about what's feasible, what's not feasible. I don't think they're germane to actually finalizing this draft. Any member of the public would be welcome to write a comment letter to the state board critiquing this. But I think that with any further deliberation among members of this committee, I think we can finalize this and get our staff to get it in on time. So that would be my suggestion to this board.
Just a comment on that, though. I mean, typically all of our reports, we take public comment and we incorporate them into it. So to exclude this one just seems a little bit out of character of what we normally do, depending on, the comments, who's receiving it. I don't want to have that bias in there.
Well, I don't see it. There's no consequence of ignoring comments that aren't relevant. And the comments that we've heard today really aren't relative to the substance of what we asked our consultants to do in this report, nor meeting the requirements that we have. The question of whether any of these are feasible is not the issue, and that's what we heard at length here. And I don't think that we are under any obligation to incorporate any specific public comment into a report that's been very carefully scoped and crafted. We have the record of this meeting. Again, any member of the public is welcome to submit a written comments to our staff. And we, perhaps we can find enough space as we are in terms of responding to the state board's comments to offer staff the ability to add any comments they think relevant to it. But I did not hear in this public comment any items that are really relevant to finalizing this report.
Seems to me that we have a record of those comments. Now, whether they
Correct.
come in writing or not, we have that. And if there was anything substantial there, I would expect it to be addressed anytime that information comes in that is relevant and could change thinking on something. But I'm going to leave that to our consultants
Yeah.
who've got this ready. I don't really want to slow this down.
Right.
Is the bottom line. And while I'm thinking about it, back to Director Reineke's comments about denitrification, that is a burden solely borne by the purveyors, customers. And it does seem like the wrong way to keep addressing basin problems is to make that particular contingent of the water users bear the costs.
All right. I just drawing back to that though, if we weren't under a time constraint, I think we would be taking a different approach is my comment on that. So
Maybe.
whether I agree with those comments that were made or not, I'm trying to leave that out of the
Yeah.
picture. I'm just going with how we normally do
Yeah.
process and we're
Yeah.
deviating from that. And
Not
some people are going to be upset with that.
Well, that happens sometimes. Maybe we could do it this way. Let me ask any of our, Mr. Heimel or either of our consultants, whether they heard anything relevant in public comment that they feel either needs to be responded to here or amended into the draft report. And seeing no one approaching the microphone, I think we've got our answer there.
Okay, I have no further comments.
So what we're looking for, I think, Mr. Chairman, is direction to staff. We had the one question about the benefits to ag reuse and Memorial Park reuse, absent any transfer of water from the east side west. I didn't know whether there were any other thoughts that colleagues on this committee wanted to put forward. But other than that, I'm prepared to make a motion that we direct staff, again, given latitude to respond in the general fashion that they indicated they would respond to the comments from the state board, to finalize the report and submit it. And I'll just frame that as a motion.
I will second that, but again, anytime information comes in that seems relevant and worthy of spending time on, I would expect that to be done. But I second that motion.
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed?
Director Reneke?
Yes, I am in favor.
Okay.
All right,
Good.
thank you.
Just wanted to make sure. Didn't hear you.
Yeah, no
Motion
problem.
passes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on, our agenda, action item 9B, calendar year 2026 budget and consultation services proposals.
Thank you, Chair Zimmer. So yeah, action 9B, this is an annual item that we bring forth to the BMC for their approval consideration. It's establishing the budget for the upcoming calendar year. And so we've put together a draft budget for the BMC's consideration that includes a number of what we call baseline services. And then we have additional budget items, and then we typically include a contingency and then have a total proposed budget. And what we have for you today is a total proposed budget of $361,935 for calendar year 2026. Just talking about the additional budget items, these are a lot of times sometimes characterized as special project items. just we have three that are included in the budget. The Basin metric update. Thank you, Jamie. Oh, and maybe let's follow the structure of the presentation. So we've got your administrative services, your baseline services. That includes your BMC administration and facilitation, your website, your accounting, legal counsel, technical support services. This is really like a technical contingency budget. And inevitably, we find that each year some additional technical analysis is desired by the BMC, and we utilize this line item for that. And then we have our annual groundwater monitoring program and development of the annual monitoring report, which is a requirement of the state, or sorry, of the court in this case. And then under the additional services, we have the Basin metric update. This is something we've talked about previously. With the improvements that we've made to the groundwater monitoring program, we think that it's warranted and frankly needed that we update the water level and chloride and potentially other metrics. Specifically our modifications to LA, and I'm going to probably get this wrong, 16, maybe it's 14, changed the reference elevation. Well, no, it changed the portion of the aquifer that we are monitoring water level for. That is now different than what we were utilizing for the water level metric previously. And so it really is inappropriate to compare current day values from that well to historical values, because current values represent, I believe it's zone E, and historical levels represented a combination of D and E, to be specific. So this would also help us address the issue of borehole leakage at Rosina. This is unfortunately a topic that we've discussed way too many times, as that impacts the chloride metric. And so we would like to get funding approved to take on that initiative in 2026. And then we also have a couple other additional service items associated with the groundwater monitoring improvement programs. And these really are sort of budget placeholders or contingency values in a sense for HCP credits. As we talked earlier, with the development of the habitat conservation program, projects that have the potential or that do impact habitat in Los Osos are being required to purchase credits to mitigate against those impacts through that program. And so we have some sort of placeholder values. Item 9 is intended for the Sweet Springs monitoring well. This wasn't originally budgeted in that project, so we wanted to include some budget in calendar year 2026 for that. And then the geophysics investigation, similarly, we didn't budget for HCP impacts. We don't know that they're going to be needed in that case. It's not necessarily a project by certain definitions. It's more of a survey activity, and we're working with county planning to determine whether it's going to require credits. And so we thought it was prudent to include it in the proposed budget in case it's needed. There's some increases in the baseline services, largely associated with additional levels of effort, incremental, rate increases and other things. And then what we have associated with the budget is the scope of work and proposals for the respective consultant services. So that's the executive director consultant services, the groundwater monitoring services, the annual report services, and then the basin metric update services, and then finally bookkeeping services. And so we've presented this draft budget for the BMC's consideration, as well as the consultant service proposals. The real goal is obviously get this approved prior to the beginning of the next calendar year. If we were able to get approval of this budget today, and we don't have to, we do have the option for a December meeting, but it's probably the only item that we would need to have on a December meeting, at least as I see it now. And so it would potentially give us the option of canceling that meeting for budget savings reasons next month. And happy to answer any questions about these proposals. And we have also got Spencer Harris here who could answer questions regarding the hydrogeo proposals.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Bring it back to the board. Any questions before we go to public comment on this? All right. We'll go ahead and take public comment.
If you have a public comment and you're in the boardroom, please come up to the podium. And if you're online, please raise your hand. We will take any public comments in the boardroom first. All right, we have one public comment online. Looks like we have none in the boardroom. Jeff Edwards, all you have to do is unmute yourself.
Thank you again. Good afternoon. My name is Jeff Edwards, and this committee's been meeting for over 10 years, and it's become clear that this basin management, our groundwater basin management, has become consultant driven. We're pushing more paper now than we ever have. This should be about pipes over paper. I've made that comment before. This fiefdom has become a full-blown bureaucracy and growing with all the trappings. They're all included: legal, accounting, admin. This thing has grown, and now there's more time spent again on paper than anything else. Meetings, BMC party staff meetings, county planning department meetings. The idea of a high level of effort or additional level of effort is kind of mind-boggling. I think what this committee needs to do is simplify, downsize, so you can actually move the needle with some projects. How much of the staff's time has been consumed with this whole water recycling funding program facilities planning study? How much time? Again, I realize this was part of the grant. Okay, great. But it's now consuming everyone. I think you've lost your way. Reserves have been used up. It's a make work culture, literally. And there's no business in this committee staff being involved in peripheral issues. Let's focus, work on the basics, simplify. I have a handful of very simple projects. The state water project, we need to do that. We need to put in the second program C well. If staff wants to get into a paper project, let's engage in a well abandonment program. Now that could be productive. Let's do that. The inflatable dam on Los Osos Creek, low tech, low cost. Why aren't we looking at that? Forget all the treated effluent discharges into the creek. What about a natural creek discharge where we simply back the flows up during wet weather, heavy rain events? That's something that this district should be looking at, but you're not. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
There's no further public comment online.
Okay, we'll bring it back to the board.
Just a quick question, if I could, Mr. Chairman. I think you covered it in your staff report, but Dan, you've consulted BMC staff on this, and this comes with their recommendation.
Yes, we have shared this with BMC party staff, got input from them primarily at our meeting last Friday. And yeah, didn't receive any,
Didn't
concern.
get any negative comments. All right. that said, I mean, are you looking for an endorsement? Because obviously, I mean, this committee can endorse, but it's the individual agencies that have to then take action to commit. So we're,
Yeah, let's talk process a little bit. So typically, the BMC adopts a budget, and then under our new accounting platform, come January 1, we would submit invoices to those, to the parties for their processing and payment. And, they would have to follow any sort of policies and procedures their organizations, would have with respect to those. That's typically how this process works.
Okay, anything, Chuck, on your end? Director Renicky, any comments?
No, Chair Zimmer, I don't have any comments.
Okay,
I would like to say thank you for reminding me how we got to reserves, just rolling things over that we hadn't spent.
yeah.
Nice little reminder.
Couple comments on, appreciate you going into the detail more than you did last time on the estimate. One of the things that I see is that when we have projects, your costs get included, the costs that are budgeted here get included on the project. So moving forward, if we could, when you have a project, you include consulting cost or whatever your cost is, or if we're hiring outside, that be part of the overall cost. Because I think that when we look back at last year, we went over budget. We went over budget primarily because of the additional work we did on the modeling and the study we were just talking about. I think a lot of your costs were included into that. So if we could break that out, at some point, I think, I have always stated that I'm concerned with our escalating costs, and I see that we are less project. In previous years, we'd have a substantial project like a monitoring well where that would be $150,000 of our budget. And now we have $50,000 of additional project work that's still somewhat categorized as a reporting type project. And so at some point, I think we really need to study our budget and where we're going and what are we doing. A lot of these projects are funded through the ratepayers. And so do they have to be in this category, and we have a monthly meeting to go over them? Could we break it down into bi-monthly meetings where we have our list of projects, we're given the updates on those projects? There seems like there could be some scale down on that. And we can ramp up as needed, but this year I see us having a lighter year than what we had last year as far as projects, but I see our budget is staying the same. Some degree it is shifting towards, a budget of administrative and projects. But I do appreciate the work that you've gone into. It makes things much clearer than it has in the past. I'll just leave it there with that part of it. But if we do go for an approval, I would like to see something come in the middle of the year where we analyze our budget, where we're going and what we're doing. So every year we're faced with these time crunches in December, and we have to approve our budget right at the very end, and we don't get to do that analysis. Okay, thank you.
so, yeah, I mean, I think part of that also speaks to things we've had on our work list, namely a revenue measure. We do know we should be spreading the cost of managing this basin over all the beneficiaries of the basin. To this point, it's been convenient not to do that. But I think that's part of the conversation about how we budget. I think we've actually got some important project work to do. It's, maybe not something quite as flashy as a well, but, for instance, thinking about the waste stream disposal on increased denitrification. We have some opportunities there to maybe cut costs down big time with that. That's something we need to study. Redoing our metrics, absolutely, something that we put off for a long time. And maybe in here, we might have a little bit of elbow room to actually start the conversation on the question of raising a stable source of revenue. Because, there will come a point, I can speak from the county side, that general fund contributions or flood control district general fund contributions are not going to be the funding source. We're going to have to stabilize this. We're having this conversation in other basins. So I'm comfortable approving this, again, subject to the fact you've consulted county staff as part of BMC staff and received no pushback from them. I think let's approve it. Let's get the invoices out, make sure that we're seamless going into 2026. Can make that a motion if you'd like, Mr. Chair.
Sure. I think we're ready for a motion.
So moved.
I'll second that. Unless Ron's kicking Dan under the table or something that I don't see.
I guess I would make a comment. That the budget that the BMC historically has had is not necessarily on the scale that it's going to be able to deliver projects. I mean, I think we talked today, just to connect one school to recycled water is $300,000 to $500,000. Once we start talking infrastructure projects, or even monitoring wells, all the monitoring wells that we've been able to put in place in the last several years have been predominantly, all funded through outside funding sources, through National Estuary Program, the Rose Foundation, and the BMC's contributions have been partial in that. And so, yeah, I mean, I understand the administrative costs have gone up. There's, we've talked enough about level of effort, but, I think if we want to transition to a project-driven budget, I don't know that, what is currently being budgeted by the parties is going to be sufficient to do that.
All right, sounds good. We have a motion
And a second.
Yep.
and a second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Do we need a roll call for our budget?
Let's do one.
We've always done it.
It never hurts.
Unanimous roll call.
Director Reinecke,
Yes.
Director Cesena,
Yes.
Director Gibson,
Yes.
Chair Zimmer.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes.
Okay, last item, adjournment. Item 10. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate your contribution.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right.